Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Berurah share. So we are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey. We'll be learning today Miras Hashem Daf Kuf Chav Tes Amud Beis. We're beginning Siman Tov Kuf Yud Beis, continuing to learn Hilchos Yom Tov. Siman Tov Kuf Yud Beis. Shaloi levashel l'tzarich kutim b'Yom Tov. The prohibition to cook on behalf of a non-Jew. Kuti is used over here not just to refer to the Kutim. There were a sect of people who had converted, but then later it was found out that it wasn't really a true conversion. So Kutim over here is used to mean Goyim as a whole. So Shaloi levashel l'tzarich kutim b'Yom Tov, the prohibition to cook on behalf of a non-Jew on Yom Tov, Ubay Gimel Seifim, and we have over here 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph. Ein mevashlim l'tzarich kutim b'Yom Tov. You are not allowed to cook on behalf of a non-Jew on Yom Tov. Let's take a look right away. The Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Ein mevashlim. You're not allowed to cook. Says the Chavetz Chaim. This is not just a problem with cooking. For hu adin kol melachah shemutar lasos b'shvil Yisrael. Any melachah that's permitted to do on Yom Tov, if you're doing it for the needs of a Yid, b'shvil nachri aser. To do it on behalf of a non-Jew is not mutter. So whatever melachah you have, let's say the melachah of havara, making a fire, you're allowed to make a fire l'tzarech echel nefesh. You're allowed to cook l'tzarech echel nefesh. You have melachas, you're allowed to make a fire even if it's not for cooking purposes. If it's for some other tzarech yom tov, you're allowed to do it, right? Because mitoich shehutra l'tzarech echel nefesh, it's hutra for something that's not a tzarech echel nefesh as well, as long as it's a tzarech yom tov. So any melachah that we have that's permissible to do on Yom Tov, if it's for the needs of a Yid, it is forbidden if it's for the needs of a non-Jew. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Beis l'tzarich kutim. Where do we know this halacha from? Diksiv, we darshan this from the pasuk that says, when is malacha mutter on Yom Tov? Asher yeyachel l'chol nefesh. It's malacha is mutter for the needs of oichel nefesh. L'chol nefesh, if it's a davar hashava l'chol nefesh, and then the pasuk says, "Hu levada yeyaseh lachem." These malachas only can be performed lachem for your needs. V'darshu Chazal, and the Chachamim darshan the pasuk lachem v'lo lekutim. These malachas are permissible for you, but not for a non-Jew. Lachem v'lo leklavim. These malachas are permissible for you, but not for the needs of your animals. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, u'letzarech karoim. How about for the needs of the karoim? Who are the karoim? So the karoim were a group of people, like you had the tzedukim and the baitusim. These were a bunch of people who were yidden, but they were kaifer in Torah Shebal Peh. They weren't makabel Torah Shebal Peh. They only followed Torah Shebiksav. So were you allowed to do malacha for karoim? So b'tshuvas Rebbe B'Tzalel Siman Gimel Oyser, in the tshuva over there, it says that it's aser to do malacha on the part of karoim. However, v'yesh matirin, there are those that say that it's mutter because even though they're kaifer and Torah Shebal Peh, the tayim heim uminik aviseim biyadehem. It's not so much that they're doing it because they're kaifer and Torah Shebal Peh. They're doing it because this is the Messiah that they had. They think that they're keeping the Torah properly. They don't realize that what they're doing is wrong. If you have chas v'shalom a yid who's a mumar la'avodas kechavim, somebody who's a meshumid, somebody who worships avodah zarah, or you have somebody who's mechal Shabbos b'farhesia, he's mechal Shabbos publicly, so that's an act of kfira, and if he's kaifer in Shabbos, it's kilu kaifer b'chal Torah kula, dinoi ka'akum, he has the same din as a non-Jew. And the same way, you're not allowed to do malacha on behalf of a non-Jew on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do malacha on behalf of somebody who is mechal Shabbos b'farhesia. Okay, so here we have this isser. You're not allowed to do malacha on behalf of a non-Jew. And therefore, says the Mechaber, let's continue in the words of the Mechaber, Lefikach, therefore, since you're not allowed to do malacha for the non-Jew, aser lahazminoi, you're not allowed to invite him over to your house for a meal on Yom Tov. Why? Shema yarbe b'shviloi. Because we have to worry that you might increase your food production and you might do malacha on behalf of him. Now we have to take a look in the Mishnah Berurah here and see exactly what it is we're afraid of. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Gimel, lahazminoi. You're not allowed to invite the non-Jew to come over to your home for a meal. Now you might say, what's the problem? I already prepared my Yom Tov meal. So what exactly is this concern that now that I invited the non-Jew, I might go ahead and I might be marbe, I might prepare something extra for him. I have my whole meal already prepared. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the problem is, the yesh lachush, we need to be concerned. Maybe you'll put up another pot of food for him. Because now that you went ahead and you invited him, so you invited him to come to your house for company, you want to be mechabed him, so we're afraid you're going to put up another pot of food. Now let's go right away to Ois Kat and Dalet here. The Chavetz Chaim says, Shema Yarbe Bishviloi. We're concerned that you might be marbe. Well, exactly what's the problem with being marbe for the non-Jew? Pirush, Shema Yavashel Kedero Lavada. The fear, the concern over here is that you'll put up another pot of food for the non-Jew. This is a pot of food that you would not have put up if not for the fact that you invited the non-Jew. You see, what the Chavetz Chaim is dealing with over here is we have to remember that we said earlier, let's say it's just you and your wife having the Shabbos meal, and both of you are not very big eaters, so you're going to have one slice of meat, your wife is going to have one slice of meat. You could put up a 12-quart pot of meat stew, and we don't say that you're doing extra bishul on Yom Tov, and that's a problem. And we said that there are two reasons for that. One is that the putting up of the beef stew is one tercha. It's tercha chada. Even though you're putting up a nice big pot of beef stew, but I'm cooking a stew. So that's one tercha. And as long as you're doing one tercha, we're not so concerned that you're doing something extra on Yom Tov. And then there's a second ingredient to this heter as well. And that is that even though you only need 2 slices of meat, 2 slices of meat in a pot don't come out very tasty. But when you make 6 pounds of meat or 8 pounds of meat or 9 pounds of meat, you end up with a very rich, very tasty stew. So all the other meat that you are marbe, that you don't really need, it all has a benefit to Yom Tov because the Yom Tov food is going to taste better. And it's all considered tercha chada. It's all considered one tercha. So we're not concerned with the fact that you're going to be marbe. Not only that, we even saw earlier that you could be marbe even though you know you're doing it for during the week. So we're coming up now to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos and Sunday. Technically speaking, you could put up a nice big pot of stew on the first day. Well, this year you can't do it on the first day of Rosh Hashanah because it's Shabbos. But on Sunday, you could put up a nice big pot of stew, knowing full well that you're going to eat the leftovers on Monday night and on Tuesday night. You say to yourself, yeah, I'll make a big 12-quart pot of soup. Not a big deal. I'll invite over the kids. They'll come over Monday night. So you know that you're being marbe for the chayil, but it doesn't matter because it's tircha chada, and Yom Tov benefits from the extra meat because the whole stew is going to be tastier. So really, to be marbe for the fact that you're having the non-Jew here, what's the problem? So I made a bigger stew. It's still a tircha chada, and Yom Tov still benefits from it. So what's the problem? Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim is explaining the problem is Shema Yavashel Kedero Lavada Shaloi Hayam Avashel Lo Mishvila Akum. What we're afraid of is that you're going to put up another dish. Think about it this way. Maybe you're inviting over, some Indian coworker, and you say to yourself, "Oh, what's he going to eat? He's not going to eat cholent." Okay, you know what? I'll put up. I have a recipe for some Indian food, and now you're going to put up a separate pot of food. If you're putting up a separate pot of food, so now you're doing a new tircha and you're doing a new bishul, really just for the non-Jew, and that you're not allowed to do. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cut and dalet. And this is why it's because this is the Isser. Because the Isser is based on the fact that we're afraid you're going to put up a separate pot l'chvoid the non-Jew guest that you invited. This This is why we can have a heter later on when we're talking about your eved. When it comes to your non-Jewish eved, we're not worried that you're going to put up a new pot of food l'chvoid your eved. That we're not concerned about. Okay, continues the Mechaber. V'dafka lahazminoi. The yisr over here is only if you're going to invite him over, to come over to you. Says the Ramah right away, Haga lebeisai. The worry over here is if you invite the non-Jew to come join you in your house. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. V'dafka lahazminoi lebeisai. That's when we have a concern. Ritzayna Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, Tekevan Cheroitza lechabdoi. By the fact that you invited him to come over to your home, it's clear that you want to be mechabed him, right? You consider him an honored guest. You want to honor him. You want to treat him nicely. He's joining you at your table. Then that's when we have to be concerned that you might decide to put up some fresh delicacies for this non-Jew that you're inviting so graciously to your home. But if you decide to send food over to a non-Jew's home, then we're not afraid that because you decided to send food over to the non-Jew, you're going to put up a separate pot of food. Okay, continues the Ramah. So the Ramah said over here that when is it a problem? Lebeisai, when you're inviting him to your home. But if you want to send food over to the non-Jew's home, and how are you going to get the food over there if you live in a place where there's an isser of carrying? Let's remember, Haitzah is mutter on Yom Tov. But Haitzah, there isn't a blanket heter of Haitzah on Yom Tov. It's not that the melachah of Haitzah doesn't exist on Yom Tov. It's just like Bishul. Bishul is a melachah on Yom Tov, which is mutter. If you're doing it l'tzarech echel nefesh, and you're doing it l'tzarech hayoim, that it's mutter. Haitzah also is a melachah that's mutter on Yom Tov, but there has to be a tzarech. You can't go out into the street and just pick up a rock, stop carry something for absolutely no tzarech Yom Tov. There has to be a tzarech ktsas. Otherwise, Haitzah is aser, same way it's aser on Shabbos. So if you live in a place where in order for you to get the food from your house to the non-Jew's house, you don't have an Eruv, so that means you're doing Haitzah. You have no right to do the melachah of Haitzah for the benefit of a non-Jew. That's not mutter. The same way Bishul is not mutter for a non-Jew, Haitzah is also not mutter for a non-Jew. So how are you getting it over to the non-Jew's house? You're doing it al yedei kuti. You're giving it to a non-Jew to transport it to the non-Jew's house. Then shari. Then this is mutter. So again, just to sum up the Ramah here, the Mechaber said, when is there an isser? You're not allowed to cook for the non-Jew. Because you're not allowed to cook for the non-Jew, you're not allowed to invite the non-Jew over to your house. Because once you invite him over to your house for a meal, we're chayshish that you're going to put up a new pot of food for him. Then the Mechaber said, it's only that you're not allowed to invite him to your house. Says the Ramah, but if you want to send food over to a non-Jew, and you're going to transport it to him by giving it to a non-Jew to bring it to him, that's mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, a nice cut and vav. If you want to send food over to a non-Jew's house, here again, you want to send food over to a non-Jew's house, that's only if you already prepared your Yom Tov Suda. Now you made an 8-quart pot of beef stew, and like we said, you and your wife only needed 1 slice of meat each, so you have plenty of extra. So you're going to go send down the block to Tony, your coworker, for whatever reason you're doing it. So you want to go send food down the block to the non-Jew. Okay, you'll give it to a non-Jew to bring it to his house. That you could do. Avalim hirba b'shviloi. Afilu ba'oisa kedera shebishal gam kein la'atzmai aser. Here we have an interesting thing. If you decide, I want to add more meat to my pot because I want to send some of the stew over to Tony, that's aser. Now, this is very interesting. Remember, to make a bigger stew for your family, even beyond what you need, even if you know that you're going to eat it during the week, that's mutter, because it's a tircha chada, it's one tircha, and Yom Tov benefits because the stew is tastier. But to make a bigger stew on Yom Tov for the benefit of the non-Jew, because you're going to send food down the block to Tony, that is not mutter. Even though it's a tercha chada, and even though Yom Tov benefits from the richness of the stew, it's still aser. Why? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, the kevan shemarbe b'shviloi, because once you make the decision that you're making a bigger stew to benefit the non-Jew, once we see that you made up in your mind that you're making a bigger stew for Yom Tov in order to benefit Tony, now we're afraid that you might also go ahead and put up a fresh kugel for Tony. Oh, I remember Tony got a kick out of potato kugel. I'll go make a new potato kugel for him. Well, now you're making a whole separate dish for Tony that you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. That's mamish cooking on behalf of a non-Jew. Says the Chavetz Chaim, umizeh tire, and from this halacha we see that this custom that many people had, lishloach b'Yom Tov doirin l'nachri sheroitza lechabdoi, to send over some kind of gift to a non-Jew that they wanted to be mechabit, umaisifin b'shviloi, so they made extra food, right? So they were going to make a potato kugel, and then the guy said to his wife, make a bigger potato kugel because I want to send some over to Tony. So again, you might think that that's mutter, because usually to be marbe in one dish is okay on Yom Tov, even beyond what you need, but not when you're doing it on behalf of a non-Jew. Shalai kedin hemoisim. This is not kedin, because we're afraid that once you're marbe, you might go ahead and put up something new for the non-Jew. Not only are you not allowed, apparently this was something that they did, if you're baking challah on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to make a challah for the non-Jew, because each challah is a separate tircha. You have to braid it, you have to put it in the oven, take it out of the oven. So you certainly can't make a challah for the non-Jew on Yom Tov, because that's mamish a new tircha. You're not allowed to be matriach for the non-Jew. So v'lo miboyesh also lefes b'shviloi challah achas k'moshe noigin, oilasos b'shviloi chremzel ublintzes. Well, you can't make extra chremzlach. Each chremzel is something that you pour into the pan, and then you have to flip it and everything else, like a latka. So you're being matriach on a separate entity for the non-Jew. So certainly you're allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. The chalecha v'echatzar tircha la'atzmai, these are things, the chalas, the chremzlach, the latkas, these are things that each individual piece, each individual portion is a separate tircha. So certainly you're not allowed to do that for the non-Jew. And also the chremzlach that are in the frying pan, the other 9 chremzlach don't taste better because you added another chremzel for the non-Jew. So it's not tircha chada, it's an extra tircha, and there's no benefit to Yom Tov. So that certainly you're not allowed to do for a non-Jew. Even if you're making a 3-pound batch, even if you're making a batch of gefilte fish, and you want to add another half a pound of gefilte fish into the pot, where normally that kind of ribui is mutter on Yom Tov, for the non-Jew, it's not, it's aser. It's aser. And again, the reason it's aser is because we're afraid once you have on your mind to be marbe for the non-Jew, you might make a whole new separate pot for the non-Jew. There are those achrayim that are mekel, if in the case like of the fish, where you're being marbe and you're cooking it together with what you're cooking for yourself. Uvamakim eva, if you're dealing in a case where there's a real worry of hatred, that somehow if you don't send something over to the non-Jew, there might be an eva, which might contribute to a dangerous level of anti-Semitism, or you have sidmamen, or a significant financial losses involved. After sheyesh list by Chazeh, Chavetz Chaim says it could be you could rely on these mekilim. Ois cotton zayin. The Ramah said that you're going to send the food over to the non-Jew through the agency of another non-Jew. You're going to give it to a non-Jew to transport it to